Good morning, everybody. If you're in the lobby, start grabbing people and bringing them on in. Good morning. Good morning. There we go. That's, when I'm at a seminar, I hate it when people do that. So, how is everybody today? Good. It's a little bright right here. Let's see if I can come forward without stepping off the stage. Good-looking group. Okay, so first of all, I think we might, is it 9 o'clock yet or like a minute till? Well, I figured I'd just start talking and hopefully that'll bring some folks in from the lobby. Thank you for everybody who made it through the rain this morning. We did a major event for our office, whatever that was, a month or so ago. And we did our Newport Beach cruise. Some of you were on it or maybe have seen Facebook stuff on it. And the week before, the weather was beautiful, and the week after, the weather was beautiful, but the day of our event, it's raining. So, at any rate, the rain seems to be following me around, but I want to thank everybody today who's made it. I know we got a little bit of chatter coming on in here, and I guess I'm just going to have to deal with that for the first 10 or so minutes. But we have a full schedule for those of you that have been to these conferences in the past. It's just kind of non-stop, which is why we've got to start at 9 o'clock, because if we don't, we're not going to get out of here until 3. And I think I've already made several mistakes, because I think one of the agendas indicated that we were finishing at 12. If you think we're finishing at 12, we're not. We're gonna run till 1 o'clock, so hopefully that doesn't mess you guys up too badly. We do have some food coming. Jimmy John's is one of our sponsors, and hey, Jimmy John's is in the house, so thank you guys. They're going to be putting some sandwiches out probably sometime around 10:30. Having said that, we're not taking a break. So if you see something on the agenda, you're like, oh, okay, I've seen this guy, or I'm not interested in this, that might be your opportunity to step out. Otherwise, just go out, take 2-3 minutes, grab a sandwich. I don't know if they'll let you bring them back into the theater or not. If they, we'll let you guys work that part out. So at any rate, we're going to go ahead and get started, and we'll just kind of have to power through some of the chatter and the noise, or everybody's getting settled in. I do apologize for the delay, and for those of you that got here a little earlier, again, for most of you have heard me say this, and every one of these we do, we're not professional event putter-oners. Well, the registration process kind of brought that to home here a little bit this morning, so I apologize for those of you who had to wait a little bit. I will tell you this, if you did kind of skip the registration, I still would like to know you're here. I'm not sure exactly how we do that, so I might send you an email later on and say, hey, were you there? Because we let about 200 people in and we weren't sure. So I might just ask you to say, yes, I was there, or no, I wasn't. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started. So my name's Lance Martin. I'm the broker owner of Coldwell Banker Town & Country. Oh, thank you, Alex. So this is the 8th year that we've been doing this event. And it's kind of interesting. I never, certainly 8 years ago, would have envisioned we would be in the Fox Theater doing this event here today, or for that matter, at the Doubletree for the last several years. So anyway, so here we are. Welcome, and let's go ahead and get rolling. I'm just going to do just a really quick introduction of our speakers. We've got Mark Dowling, who's going to be on a panel here this morning with the Inland Valley Association of Realtors. Art Carter, CEO of Sierra MLS, is going to be here as well. Rick Hoffman, who's with T360 and a consultant and one of the smartest real estate minds that I know anyway. He's volunteered to come on in, and we're going to put the 3 of those guys on a panel first. So this is kind of how we're going to kind of model this year's forecast with what we did last year, in that the first little bit we're going to talk industry related stuff, which, by the way, let's just take a quick survey. I'm assuming 100% of you in one form or another are in the real estate business, correct? Okay. Realtors, keep your hands up. Are there any realtors in the room? Good. By the way, there's a new NAR commercial. Have you guys seen the brand new NAR commercial? There's several of them. Have you guys, am I the only one who's seen them? NAR, National Association of Realtors, is doing commercials. And I could have sworn in the ad, the guy said realtor. And I was like, I got to go play that back. I got to listen to that. I mean, that's not possible. But anyway, we're going to talk industry stuff, because if you're not a realtor, You're probably a lender, title, mortgage, escrow, somewhere in that particular, maybe an investor, but at least in one form or another interested in real estate. So we're going to let Chris Thornburg and Dr. Husine and Bruce Norris kind of talk about what I think most of you came here to talk about today, which is where is this market going, where are interest rates going. And by the way, am I in a good spot here? Is this, I don't think, am I good? Okay, because back there I can't see anything. Well, thank you. Again, Alex. Got my cheering section up here. So we're going to talk a lot of real estate industry stuff in the beginning, but again, then we'll let Chris and Bruce and John Husing talk the economic stuff. Has anybody seen Chris, John, or Bruce recently in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months? Several of you. Okay. It's interesting because I think this is going to be the first year in a while that we might have a little bit of varying opinions on where this real estate market's going. There's been kind of a consensus the last several years that things are okay. And I think you might hear a few things that may be a little bit different than just everything's okay. And by the way, that's a real loaded question. I'm going to watch this back on the video later because everything's okay doesn't mean anything. Just like real estate values are up doesn't mean anything. Real estate values are down. Activity is up, activity is down. That doesn't mean anything to me. There was something that came out with California, or in California, that said this is what California is doing. And I turned to my people in my sales meeting and I said, do we live in California? And everyone said, yes, we do. And I said, I don't live in California. I live in the Inland Empire. Because it's different. What's happening in California isn't necessarily what's happening in the Inland Empire. You know, San Francisco is in California. Is our market the same as San Francisco's? No. And quite honestly, one community to the next. You know, at my cheerleader down here, Alex, his market's much different than ours. I mean, he's in the Brea, Loma Linda market, and I'm not. Or at least I'm peripheral. So anyway, we're going to talk about industry stuff first. Where are we going? Maybe throw out some topics like Zillow, Open Door, and a few other things, and we'll see if we can get a debate going on that. Jim Benavidez with Unison is here. Who's ever heard of Unison? Okay, Jim's an interesting cat. He is a sponsor, but I think I want him here for the following reason. Jim is an individual who is putting his money where his mouth is as it relates to this market. So if you've never heard of Unison and what they do, I think you'll be intrigued. And if nothing else, you're going to get a perspective. These economists, for example, come in and they get paid to be here and all the rest of that, and their business is doing forecasts, et cetera, et cetera. Jim is, for lack of a better word, an investor in the real estate market. And he's investing right now, and he'll tell you why and what his prospects are. So Jim's going to come up here in a little bit. Bill Blankenship with the BIA. I think I ran into Bill in the lobby. I don't know. But anyway, Bill's with the BIA. He's going to be here. Tell us what's going on with that. Todd and Steve with Back Porch. If you haven't heard of Back Porch, Todd and Steve are, and were anyway, still affiliated with Inland Empire Real Estate Investment Club. But they've got a little different thing that they're doing, and I think it's really interesting as to why they've made that decision. So we're going to talk to them a little bit. Hopefully Ito will be here. Who came here just to see Ito? Who came here just to see Ito last year? Because Ito didn't show up. Okay, so we'll see if Ito makes it this year. I talked to him yesterday. He said he was in town, which is good. And then, of course, John's going to be here, and Mr. Norris, who is speaking at Ivar right now, and then he's going to do his thing and come on over here. And then we're going to take it home with Chris Thornburg. We will have a Q&A. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work. This venue's a little different. I think I like it better than the DoubleTree. I'm not 100% sure yet, but we will do a little Q&A after all three of them speak, and we can see what they have to say. I do want to quickly thank our sponsors, Back Porch Homes. Jimmy John's, again, is providing some food, so thank you to you guys. Inland Empire Business Journal is here as well, which, by the way, if you haven't heard of the Business Journal in a while, they're back. Chase and First American Natural Hazard Disclosure, Wells and Guaranteed Rate, Homebridge and Unison. RWM, which welcome to the new RWM guys, Danny and his crew, so shout out to them. And Ed with Wholesale Capital and his gang, Old Republic and Haven Home Staging. These are my companies and my partners. So let's go ahead. This has kind of been my theme when I've done these forecasts in the past. Let's kind of pull our head out of the sand and see what's going. Anybody? I don't have a clock up here. I've got to finish this in a couple of minutes or I'm going to be in trouble. Oh, I'm right on schedule. Perfect. Okay, so the reason I've been doing these forecasts is I was paying tens of thousands of dollars a year to travel to Rio Mac and 5 Star and CAR, whatever it happened to be, And a lot of times, and I know that graphic doesn't show up very well, but a lot of times I would go to these conventions, spend a lot of money just to see Chris Thornburg speak, or I'd travel just to see John, and I said, you know what, screw that. I'm just going to bring these guys in. I'm going to do my own thing, because I'm a big data guy. So I know that this graphic isn't showing up the way I want it to, but anybody out there use Brokermetrics? Teradata, Brokermetrics? Okay, so this would look familiar to you. This is it, pulls the feed from CRMLS. I take CRMLS and I just throw everything into a bucket, the entire CRMLS. So I say, wait a minute, that doesn't look like the CRMS that I'm looking at. That doesn't look like Riverside or Moreno Valley or whatever. I throw it all in. I've been doing it for 10 years, and I've been looking at these charts for 10 years. So over 2 years, 11% increase in property values. And that's, again, those bars in the middle are the months in between. Over the last 12 months, basically flat. Does that jive with what you guys are seeing? Property values basically flat. Is that a bad thing? I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't have a problem with that. I don't really have a clicker, and those bars don't show up very well, but this is something Mark and I are going to talk about when he comes up here in a minute. Have you guys seen property values pull back a little bit? September, October, November, December? Just ever so slightly, a half a point, a point. Is that normal? Yes. Does it freak you out? Well, I heard a no. I will tell you, most of the agents I'm talking to, it freaks them out. I sit back and say, it's been doing this forever. And generally, it bounces back up in February, March, April, and May. But anyway, this year generally has been flat. It's kind of hard to see the peak, but you know, we started to go up February, March, April, May, June, July, and Mark or Art will correct me on this. I believe 2018 was a little different than some of the other years, and we peaked in July as opposed to August or September. We used to peak, based on my recollection, we used to peak in September. And then we started to peak in August, and last year we peaked in July. And then we started to pull back, but at any rate, thank God, I ran the February numbers a couple of days ago, and Mark will verify this, we ticked back up a little bit in February, which is good. So we'll see what that means, if anything. Who's a member of Inland Valley Association of Realtors? Who got the housing report that Mark and Van put out yesterday? If you're letting that go to spam, you're missing out. Take a look at that. I'm not going to read this. Mark's going to speak to it in a minute, but he's going to come up and we're going to talk about the report that they put out and what they think about that. Click. Okay, a little bit of disruption ahead. This is the same slide from last year. Yeah, there's a little bit of disruption ahead. 100% disruption ahead. I love the guy. I don't know if that's Allstate or State Farm. I kind of feel like this guy. I feel like every time I turn around, there's mayhem around me. Something's going on. I don't know who it is, but something's going on. Anyway, if we thought disruption was coming, it's not coming, it's here. I don't know whether this is going to work. Oh, actually, I'm a little ahead of myself. Who's heard of Open Door? Honestly, raise your hand if you have not heard of Open Door. You're in for a rude surprise, okay? If you have heard of Open Door, raise your hand if you know that Open Door is in our market right now. Who knew that 3 months ago? Who knew it 5 months ago? 6 months ago? Okay, well, you're lying because they weren't in our market that long ago. They just got here in whatever it was, October, November, okay? Anybody recognize that map? That's basically us. If you go to Open Door's website right now and you say, I want to buy a home, and you click on Riverside, I don't know why they call it Riverside, but they click on Riverside, that's Riverside. Got a few houses. If you're not familiar with the model, we'll talk about it in a little bit. That's Phoenix. A little bit different? I bet you Phoenix looked like Riverside not that long ago. Anyway, they're here. What does that mean to you? Well, I'll tell you what I think it means to you, and then we can go from there. So we're going to talk a little bit about Open Door. We'll see how that works. I have a video. I don't know if this is going to play. Who's ever heard of Home Bay? Okay. By the way, you guys, I'm not a professional event guy, so bear with me. I'm going to walk off stage, and I'm going to push a button. Or maybe you could push a button for me. Hold on. Hopefully this will be worth it. And hopefully the sound's working. Here we go. Oh, we have no sound. All right, forget that. Can you do me a favor and just kill that for me, brother? Yeah, just click it, just anywhere, just click the mouse. I got, no, not there. No worries. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Home Bay. If you haven't heard of Home Bay, in the same way if you haven't heard of Open Door, who's heard of OfferPad? It's the same thing. And Art will probably tell us about 15 other companies that are doing very, very similar stuff. If you've never heard of Home Bay is in some ways kind of like a Purple Bricks. And I don't want to talk companies and commissions. We're not here to do that. And I mean, everyone's got a business model, and you got to figure that out on your own. But this is the reason I wanted to show the home bay video, is because similar to some of the other commercials that we see on television, they basically say, again, raise your hand if you're a realtor. They basically say you're not worth pretty much anything, right? You know, some of them, and some of them are pretty nasty about it. That home bay commercial that I was going to show you has the real estate agent basically cleaning a swimming pool, holding a sign so that Tony Hawk can go do some sort of a skateboard move. You know, the buyer felt sorry for his realtor, so he gave him a job sweeping his pool. Is that a common thread? Are we hearing a lot of that lately? We are. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to go ahead and bring up our panel. So Mark and Art and Mr. Hoffman, come on down. We're doing handhelds, guys, so we're going to have to work through that a little bit. And we're going to have a little conversation. So good morning, guys. Good morning. Good morning. All right, you guys can read the bios. If you don't know the guys, you've got Mark Dowling at the end in the jeans. Thanks for dressing up, Mark. Appreciate that. Got the nice cool guy shoes. That's okay. I kind of sort of got jeans on too.
At least he wore a tie.
He did. He did. Well, and then look at you. Rick Hoffman in the middle. I've got a bio for Rick with T360 and a whole bunch of other things, but he does so many other things it's not even funny. So we'll let him, you guys could read his bio. We'll let him introduce himself in a little bit. And Art Carter, King and CEO of Sierra MLS and taking over the MLS world. So I'm going to get started with the following. I'm going to put Mark's slide back up a little bit. And these guys have been teasing me because we've had this event planned for a long time, and everyone says, what are we going to talk about? And give me the questions. And I'm like, don't worry about it. We're just going to wing it. We're going to see how things go. So I want to start with Mark, though. All right? Mark and I have been talking a little bit, and I want to start, and we'll let you kick it off, and then we'll just kind of see where this goes from a standpoint of where we are. What are your feelings as it relates to the real estate world? And we'll start with, not necessarily with things like Open Door and such, although I want to get to that. I want to start with the market. So you guys look at these numbers, you put this out, it's your version of what Terradatum's doing. You were telling me that prices have been down, but we kind of kicked back up. So what's your interpretation of what we're seeing in these numbers, Mark? What's happening?
Well, first of all, we never control the market. We may think we do, we may obsess about that issue, but we don't control it. We just respond to it. The fact is, the last 6 months of last year, and I talked about it earlier, we saw the market beginning to slow down. It became more of a buyer's market. It was trending in a different direction. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Inventory began to go up. I'm an old school guy. I'm a supply-demand guy. I mean, you look at the numbers, inventory was going up. Days on market was going from 20 to 30 days up to 40 to 50 days. And home values stalled at about July of last year and began to go down. And it went down 3% from July of last year to January. Now, this month, February, I should say last month, we saw the first uptick in 6 months, went up $7,000. Not a bad thing. I mean, the market's always changing. We have to respond to it accordingly. But it's not necessarily a bad thing if values go down. It is expensive to buy a house. So much so that if you look at our region compared to other comparable regions, whether it's a Phoenix or a Dallas or a Las Vegas, I mean, housing in our region is 40 to 50% more expensive than it is in those other areas. And that's a problem. That means discretionary income of home owners is now being spent in a disproportionate way toward housing that you don't have to see in other areas.
So, that being said, and CAR put out a forecast earlier, I think in October, said we're going to sell less houses in 2019 than we did in 2018. Those numbers kind of looks like that may happen?
Yeah, last year, if you look at 2018, there were 10%, actually about 9% fewer home sales in the inland region than there was the year before. So it was about a 9% decrease. That was the first time we've seen a decrease in sales, in sales units in 6 or 7 years. We have seen an increase every single year for 6 or 7 years. Last year was down 9%. Accordingly, sales volume was down.
In unit sales.
In unit sales.
Right, not price.
Sales volume was down as well, not as much. It was down about 2%, but that's mainly because it was offset by increased median sales price.
You guys kind of get how that works? We're selling less houses. Prices are not going down. Volume is down, but not as much because the prices are up.
Yes.
Right? So less units, volume, you know, you take a bunch of $500,000 houses and multiply them to however many we sell. Well, this year we're selling them for 5. Last year we sold them for 480, so the volume isn't down so much. But we're selling less houses, which is a problem, because for most of us in this room, we're making our living based upon commission dollar and the number of those commission dollars. So if we sell 5% less house, or what was the number, 9%?
Last year was 9%. It's
9% less.
in the inland area.
Well, I don't know about you guys. I'll speak for myself. If my unit sales go down by 9%, thank God the volume didn't necessarily go down. That's a problem, because we're living on pretty thin margins. Okay, I'm going to jump to Art. Any comments on that? Because you're kind of the keeper of this data. Can we trust this stuff?
You can trust Mark.
I can trust Mark. Okay. So, on the numbers, are you have anything different or anything to add as far as what you think what we're going to see in these prices, or what?
No, I think, you know, across the board within the CRMLS system, and it was interesting for you to put that slide up that was encompassing of all of CRMLS, because recognize that CRMLS goes all the way from Red Bluff in Northern California down to the San Diego border. So there's some pretty significant different micro marketplaces and things that are going on in those marketplaces and different pressures that they're receiving than what might necessarily be happening in the Inland Empire. But across the board, we're kind of mimicking what Mark's numbers are showing across the whole entire CRMLS footprint.
And I think that's important for us to know, because if CRMLS isn't what it was. We're like gigantic. I mean, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times than what it was, depending upon what period of time. But it also, I think, makes the point that I was mentioning earlier, as far as, you know, Long Beach isn't the Inland Empire. San Francisco certainly isn't the Inland Empire. So, anyway, okay, enough about that sort of stuff. I want to talk. Oh, yeah, Rick, jump in.
I get to make a comment too. As a practitioner, Mark said it best. You guys have to worry about units, and you should always keep your focus on units. You have no control over the pricing at all. The only thing you have control over is your market inventory. So as long as you stay focused on units, you'll do well in any market, because the market's just the market. You don't create it, you don't maintain it, the market is the market. You need to react to it and operate within its constraints. And the best way to do that is, if you did 5 units last year, do 7 units this year. If you did 10 units last year, do 12 units this year. And if you do that, you'll survive any and all trends and actually prosper in the most difficult ones.
Okay, well, to that point then, perfect. That's going to segue a little bit into, I mentioned Open Door a minute ago, and most of you raised your hands that you had heard of them, or at least had heard of them recently. I believe Tom Ferry has a piece of information out that talks about where he thinks Open Door might be. I don't know what the projection was. I think it was 5 years or maybe longer. And where he thinks and it's not just Open Door, it's the whole iBuyer program. And let me back up just a half a step if you're not familiar with Open Door's model. Open Door is basically a direct consumer model. For the most part, no realtor, at least on the purchase side. They'll do some co-op stuff if they sell, and a few other things here and there. But generally, it's a direct to consumer model. A gigantic hedge fund buyer says, hey, we want to buy properties, and I want to go to the consumer and say, I want to buy your house. Tom Ferry thinks that could represent as much as 30% to 35% of the market in 4, 5, 6, I don't know what the number was, don't quote me on that. So we just talked about unit sales being down maybe 9% or whatever happens to be. If another 10% goes in a different direction, what does that look like? What does that look? Well, one of my questions for you guys, are we going to have more or less realtors this year, next year, the following year? I've been asking that forever, and it always seems like generally in reasonably good markets they go up. What does it look like if 20% of our sales go to iBuyers? And who wants to grab that?
I think you need to expand your definition of iBuyer, because it's not just the Open Doors and the Knox and the OfferPads of the world. I think probably everybody has been inundated with the information that Zillow is making a pivot in their business model, and they're entering into the iBuyer program with both feet. And that is significant. You know, Open Door, you know, they've got close to $1 billion in investment from Wall Street. And it's important to recognize that the investment that you see being poured into the iBuyer system is being poured into the technology. The only way that these companies can compete with the current and existing environment is by driving their margins down to the point where it makes sense to the consumer. And that convenience, and Opendoor will give you money out of your house within 3 to 5 days after you going to them and saying, I want to sell it. And what they then do is they take a very sophisticated system and move property as quickly as they possibly can. In the Dallas marketplace last year in August, they moved 800 properties in the month of August. And they did that with 8 employees. They are real estate agents, but they're employees in the system, so they utilize technology to drive that system. What's really happening in the iBuyer infrastructure and the industry of iBuyers, and it's a very new industry, is with Zillow entering into it, it's changing the dynamic. Opendoor spends and Knock and OfferPad spend a lot of money on advertising. Zillow spends absolutely nothing advertising to the consumer because their portal gives them all the leads to their iBuyer system that they could possibly need. So I think it's important that everybody knows that. Zillow has set a target of 60,000 homes in 2019 across the country. And they're in 8 marketplaces right now. They are entered into the Southern California marketplace. The iBuyer system is targeting properties in between $200,000 and $600,000. So,
which is us.
Which is, yeah, that's the main reason why all of them are centered into the Riverside and San Bernardino marketplaces. Not so much into Orange County, not so much into San Francisco. It just doesn't make sense, in the $1 million plus properties for them to turn things as quickly as they need to. So, important things.
Has anybody had any experience with, well, I can barely see out there, but raise your hand if you've had any experience with any of the iBuyer programs, specifically Opendoor, because they're now pretty much here. Okay, I see a few hands going up. Let me just give you a tip. You need to pay attention to what they're doing, all right? Even if you don't like their model, and I don't like it for the obvious reasons, it's in theory gonna change our model dramatically and in theory take transactions away from your day-to-day real estate offices. But you need to pay attention to what they're doing because they're here. I did a sales meeting in my office back in October, November, and one of the 8, matter of fact, Kristen, I saw you earlier, there she is. By the way, that young lady is the first realtor to close an escrow with Opendoor. They bought her listing. And where's Chuck Behringer? Raise your hand, Chuck. Chuck is the first realtor.
Is what Tom Ferry is talking about with 30%. What I'm hearing is more in the range of 20%. Recognize that half of those sides are still going to come back into the real estate industry. And they're still going to be dependent upon other brokers and agents in the local marketplace to help them turn those properties as quickly as they possibly can. So not everything is as dire as you're seeing, but even a 10% decrease in the amount of sides, and what Rick talked about was you as brokers and agents need to be more concerned about the sides that are available to you. Even a 10% decrease in the sides is a significant piece. But recognize that Rick is right, that I talked about the money that they're raising is going all towards technology. It's not going towards buying the homes. They buy these homes with bridge loans. And in a bridge loan situation, it'll be interesting to see. Zillow told me last week that they're automatically calculating a 90-day hold into every property that they buy. What happens if days on market goes past 90 days in a market downturn? It'll be a different situation.
But pause you on that real quick, because we're pressed on time. And again, if you've never been to one of these conferences I do, I call it like a very Inman style conference. It's just quick, quick, quick. And these guys only have another 5-10 minutes at the most. And I know we had to be careful, so I don't want to get into an area of, what would happen if Zillow went full force into that and the room's going, I'm going to pull my stuff. Okay, well, Zillow, this isn't new. They've been dabbling around with this. It was called instant offers not that long ago. As a matter of fact, I think they're still calling it instant offers. Well, I'll tell you what I did. When Zillow came out with their instant offers, I flipped the lid. I called them up and said, cancel all my stuff. I'm not going to do that, So I think Zillow, even though they're in the best position to potentially come in and compete, they're also in some ways in the worst position, because that's changing your business model from an advertiser to us, which, again, long conversation, don't want to get into it. It's quite a bit different than a new customer, a new business in the form of Wall Street money coming in and competing. So I don't know what that looks like, but I think it's going to be messy. And I can just imagine how we as an industry would respond. I know how I would respond to it. Are you kidding me? You're now going to be buying properties, and at the same time, we're going to be paying you for advertising, and we've kind of sort of given you our MLS data for the last X amount of years. That's a tough one for Zillow. I don't know what that looks like. So, go ahead. Oh, neither do you?
Neither do I. I think, and I'll leave this because I've dominated a lot of the conversation, but I know that there's constant angst about not just Realtor.com, but Zillow and some of the things that are going on out there. You as brokers and agents still hold the ultimate choice on your ability to deliver data to those portals. And Zillow and Realtor.com have to be very aware of that prospect, because CRMLS, I just put it out there, CRMLS does not make those decisions on our broker's behalf. You make it on your own behalf, and CRMLS facilitates a delivery mechanism for them, but there is very much the power in your hands as to the information going out.
Yeah, sure there is. Who's not syndicating their listings to Zillow? Raise your hand. How's that work for you when you take that listing and then you get a phone call the next day from the seller and says, how come my stuff's not on Zillow? So Rose raised her hand. I think she was the only one. That's a problem. That's a problem. They've got themselves so ingrained into how the consumer wants to receive their data, for us to sit back and say, we want to do something differently, which we've always been able to do. We could always pull back and say, no, we're not going to participate. Offices do that periodically, and then one of their agents comes to them 2 days later and says, wait a minute, my seller's going to pull the listing because they're not syndicated to Zillow. Okay, and I know this is so fast, I could have this conversation for 2 hours. I want to bring it back to Mark and Rick specifically as it relates to, you guys know the dirty little secret in our business that 50% of the agents in our business don't close any business, right? They're either retired or their spouses are making money or whatever it happens to be. So to the degree that unit sales were to drop, for half of us, it doesn't really matter. Do you have a thought on what that would mean if we were to see unit sales drop for the other half?
You just said the dirty little secret. How dare you?
Yes.
We said we were going to do that.
I know.
I'm kidding. First, I should say that Open Door is a broker, and they are members of IVAR. And if they're in the audience, I'm going to thank them for their membership. But the issue is, are we going to see part-time agents continue to exist in our industry? Is that kind of what you're hinting at, given the fact that the industry is changing and they may or may not have a role or a place?
Sure.
I would think the short term, the answer is not going to be a substantial change. If you look at the data, and CAR has all the membership data relative to statewide membership of realtors, and you chart that against production, home sales in the state, oddly enough, realtors stay in the business regardless of what's going on in the market. You lose some, of course, but it doesn't correspond to the changing market as much as you think. The fact is, it's not particularly expensive to be a realtor. It's roughly $1,000 a year, and most people can afford $1,000 a year, particularly if every other year, every 3 years, they're getting either a referral fee or they're selling their neighbor's house or their daughter's house or something to that effect. So I don't think there'll be a major change. I think where we could see a change, though, is the referral side. If the industry continues to become more complex, and if you're not doing transactions and connected to this industry, you're going to struggle to figure out how to even close transactions. And in those scenarios, I see agents just saying, you know what, I'm going to be a referral agent. I'll refer business, I'll get a 25% referral fee, and I'm just going to do that as opposed to being an active agent and trying to pretend that I actually know what I'm doing.
Okay, let me piggyback on what Mark said, and then I'm going to let Rick kind of close the panel down here for our opening session. Again, you guys know I'm a broker owner. We've had part-time agents, and many of you in this room might be part-time, and many of you might work for my company. I'm not saying that I'm going to give you a pink slip tomorrow, but I'm telling you that I believe the business is changing so dramatically, there's just less room. There's just less room for that. And quite honestly, there's even less room for that second or third quartile of agents, just because of consumer expectations, the referral. And by the way, Art had said something about, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this sounds kind of dire. If anything you're going to take away from here today is, oh my God, that was bad news, or oh my gosh, that person was just kind of down on the market, I want you to twist it a little bit. I made more money in what most of you would describe as down, terrible markets, REO cycles in the 90s, the Great Recession, 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, sometimes even today it feels like we're still recovering from the Great Recession. I made more money in that market than I made in frankly, what most people would consider the good markets. You have to position yourself in a way to take advantage of that. When things are going down, well, I got to go get the REO business. I'm going to become a short sale professional. I'm going to change. I'm going to do something differently. Again, we just mentioned Open Door, which, by the way, I consider Open Door a client of mine, too. We're doing business with Open Door. The model's different than ours. I'm concerned about it, but It doesn't mean I'm doing business with them. And frankly, if Zillow does their thing, I'm going to do business with them as well. So to that point, Rick and I talked about this a little bit a day or two ago or a week or so ago. And if you don't know Rick, I would suggest you get to know Rick, look him up, try to send him an email or whatever it happens to be, because he's an industry giant, and I mean that. What advice would you give what advice would you give the realtor in the room to position yourself and put a business plan together for success?
You know, I think it applies equally to individual realtors and also broker owners. We've been very passive within our industry for quite a number of years now. I believe that the first thing that you should consider doing is re-educating yourself as to what the opportunities are in the market. You know, with every challenging market, there is another opportunity if you've got your eyes open. And the only way that you can have your eyes open and be able to take advantage of opportunities is if you're looking straight ahead and quit looking over your shoulders and trying to figure out what Open Door is going to do or what Zillow is going to do. Those things you have no control over. What you do have control over that we have given away as an industry is you have control to become an expert in your local market community. You have control to take over as an individual agent's neighborhoods by demonstrating that you can add value to a person when they have to buy or sell a house. That's going to be the key, because the biggest challenge I see right now, it's kind of on the horizon. It started in the last quarter of 2018. There was a real dip in business in the last quarter of 2018 that was started because of interest rates, and they didn't climb that much. But it sure put a stopper on a bunch of business for that last quarter. So you need to pay attention to inventory and affordability. Those are going to be the two biggest issues in my mind for the next couple of years, especially if the wild card shows up and interest rates decide to tick back up to more normalized levels. So become an expert in your market, educate yourself as to what you can do as a challenge to inventory and affordability, and you'll not only, as Lance just said, you'll not only survive this next cycle, you come out of it smelling like a rose.
Okay, guys, give him a hand. Thank you very much. I don't know if we've got Unison queued up. Is Jim in the house? So Jim, I don't know where you are. Again, this is us. Work your way on up here. Grab one of these mics. Do you want to kill two of those mics? While Jim's getting situated, just really quick on Open Door. Who's actually showed an Open Door property before? None of you. Okay, I'm gonna shout two of you. Well, a couple of you. I'm gonna challenge you. You saw that list, that map. There was, I don't know, 25, 30 properties. Those are properties that Open Door has purchased in our marketplace. They're currently for sale. They're listed. And again, to Mark's point, they're realtors. They're our brethren. And don't take anything away from here as a negative. I consider Open Door my customer. So God forbid I said anything that would upset them. But I want to challenge you all to go to their site, take a look at one of their listings, and go look at it. Go look at their listing. Raise your hand if you're familiar with how you get access to their listings. Okay, let me give you something to think about. You drive, and you're not a realtor. You're just a consumer. You're driving down the street. You say, oh, there's a house for sale, and it says it's open all the time, and it's Open Door. And you go to the front door, and it says, would you like to see me? You're not with a realtor. You're by yourself. You're just a consumer. And it says, have you got the Open Door app? And you say no, and it says download it. And 30 seconds later, I have the Open Door app in my hand. Turn on my location service. It says, oh, you're in front of 123 Main Street. Would you like to go in? You say yes. It gives you a code. You type it in. Guess what happens? The door opens. You're not with a realtor. You walk in. You're not with the realtor. Oh, by the way, this is 7 days a week, I think from 6 a.m. to 8:30 or 9 p.m. Who has trouble showing listed houses today? None of you guys have problems showing properties? Okay, well, you're not showing enough properties. I don't care if the house is vacant. It's hard to get in our properties. We make it difficult. Anyway, you can go straight into an Open Door listing without an agent. Oh, and then it's even better yet. Oh, honey, I really like this one. Would you like to put an offer in? Click. The world's changing. Is that a consumer-friendly model? I would suggest it is. Do we have a consumer-friendly model with how we show our properties? Maybe not so much. Okay, welcome Jim. Jim, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great.
Here, pull up a chair. Okay,
Thanks,
so the reason I asked Jim, who's heard of Jim's company, Unison? 3 of you. Okay, well, you're in the right spot, buddy.
Great.
Okay, I'm going to stand a little bit. Okay, so this is the deal. I was introduced to Jim last year, and the reason I wanted Jim to come up and tell you a little bit about his company, we truly only have about 10 minutes if we're going to stay on schedule, is Jim's company, private money, correct?
Correct.
Can you share with how much money that is? A lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot of money, private money. So it doesn't have to be Wall Street, doesn't have to be hedge fund, it's a lot of money. Tell us what you're doing with that money.
So we're backed by university endowment programs and pension funds. That's who our investors are. And so what they're doing is just providing us long-term patient capital. And what we do is we have 2 programs that invest into single-family residences. There's no interest, there's no monthly payments for up to 30 years on both programs. But what we hope to do...
Let's stop right there.
Okay.
So you're doing loans on houses.
Yep. So we're not doing loans, it's an investment.
Thank you. Investing into the property, no payments. Up to how long?
30 years.
30 years. So let me lay the scenario out. I want to buy a house. I'm a little short on down payment. I'm looking at a Fannie Freddie product, and I'm hooked up with one of the wonderful lenders in here. And Jim basically does a second for the most part, correct?
Yes.
Fannie Mae approved, correct?
Freddie Mac.
Freddie Mac approved. So you're going to put in $500,000 house. I'm going to put in some money. You're going to put in some money. I may be 50 grand short to get the house I want. I match your model. You bid me 50 grand.
Correct.
Equity share.
So profit sharing or profit or loss is what we like to talk about. And because when you talk about equity share, you think about all the equity.
Right.
So let's delineate on that because there's 3 different types. There's down payment, that's equity. We don't share in that. We don't share in equity that's created by them paying their mortgage down over time. And we don't share in equity that's created by home improvements.
Okay. So basically you share in the equity that's based on your investment, your portion of the investment. So there's 2 things I want to talk to you about. We don't have enough time to get into the program in super depth, but if you have a buyer that's short, you might want to sit back and say, they want this, they can qualify for that. Let's see if this program works with Jim. They come in and they invest $20, $30, $50, $100,000. Which, by the way, what's your cap on your, what's the most expensive home you've participated in?
So the one that I've been most expensive is like $2.7 million.
2.7 million.
So we can actually invest up to $500,000 into a property on the jumbo side. So what I was talking about earlier was basically Freddie Mac, but we do have jumbo investors as well.
Okay. So I know you don't look at it this way, but let's suppose I look at it as the consumer as I just got a second trust deed from Unison for 200 grand.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making a payment to you guys, correct?
Correct.
There's no payment made. There's no 5-year balloon payment, correct?
I'm sorry,
There's not a balloon payment in 5 years.
No.
When do I pay you the money back?
When you decide to exit the agreement.
When I decide to sell the house or refinance. What if I don't decide to sell the house for 30 years?
So that's fine, but at the end of the 30th year, you either have to buy us out or sell the property.
Right.
Right.
Anybody ever heard of such a thing? No, it's not a reverse mortgage.
Nope.
It's basically an equity share type program. And I think it's super cool, but that's not really what I wanted to bring Jim up here before. Okay, this is a market forecast. We're trying to figure out where things are going. Are we in a good place? Are we in a bad place? Are we in a stable place? One of our prior speakers, I'm not sure which it was, I think it was Mark or Rick, had indicated that when things started to slow down a little bit in September, October, and November, we as an industry started to do what? I'll say it. We as an industry started to panic. I felt panic in my offices. I absolutely felt people panicking. I'm like, just relax. This is a normal kind of a cycle. It's going to be okay. And guess what? January we jumped back up, and February we jumped back up. I'm like, oh, good, thank God, because otherwise maybe I would have been panicking. Are you guys loaning money in 2019?
Oh, absolutely.
So you're confident?
Absolutely confident.
And you're running, this is real money. This isn't, you just say there's pension investors as well?
Exactly.
So you just can't go willy-nilly and just say, I'm just going to throw money away and I've got some hedge fund guy I don't have to worry about because they're...
Not at all. So long-term play, we're not really interested in what's happening in the next few years. It's really a long-term play. What it does is it allows our pension funds and endowment programs to invest in an asset class that tracks inflation. So they're really looking for returns from 10 to 50 years out to really meet the demands of their investors that are putting money into their programs.
So it's fair to say you're confident in 2019 and beyond, because I guess you're not even looking at 2019. Your investment is
way out,
way past that. Okay, I know we've got still a limited amount of time. I did want to basically give you an opportunity, because you said there's another program that's similar. This is on the homeowner program.
Yeah, so it's a homeowner program,
piece of what that means.
And what that does really is it's a home equity line of credit alternative. And so if you have somebody that has a first trustee that's a really good interest rate, and maybe they don't want to untap it or just unwrap it, we can come in and access part of their equity up to 17.5%. and without any payments, just like the home buyer program I was telling you about. So it might be an alternative to a reverse mortgage as well too. Or maybe he just likes the fact that he'd like to have money without payments. There's a lot of different applications behind it, but in just that's...
So it's purchase money, but it's also basically refi money, so to speak. I know you don't like to say the refi, but it's
right.
I can be an owner in place and sit back and say, hey, I'd like to do something here. And by the way, it is equity share, so if they give you some money, they want that money back. And then if equity goes up, they want their piece of the money that goes up. They're not giving this money for free necessarily. But at the same time, and we don't like to talk about this because this has never happened, right? But if, God forbid, we do a loan together and the market gets a little ugly and properties pull back and I decide to exit that property, and at the end of the day there's a loss involved, you guys share in the loss.
If you sell it in a down market because it's depressed, then the way the mechanics are behind it is that we will actually lose a percentage against the investment that we put in initially. So
and again, and the reason I mention that is these guys got real money, which, by the way, we just had a 10-minute conversation about an open door type company. They have real money. They're not in this market to lose money. So there's obviously a certain amount of confidence. That's really kind of the point I'm trying to drive. I have an agenda with this conversation. And,
sure.
And my agenda is you have real money, you're investing it, and you're not afraid of 2019.
Not at all.
All right. Okay, guys, give Jim a hand. If you're not familiar with Unison,
very much.
he'll be out in the back. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Dennis.
All right, appreciate it, buddy. Okay, next up, we've got Bill Blankenship coming up. Have we found Bill? Is he in the house? Come on up, Bill. While you're coming up to the stage, I'm gonna. I want to kind of finish up my thought a little bit with Unison. I was introduced to them, I guess it was a year and a half ago. And I've heard of equity share before, but I wasn't really quite familiar with the way they did it. And not only do they do it the way they do it, but they're also willing to share in the loss. And I was like, wow. Generally, when you've got these investors and they're going to give you 50 grand or 100 grand, if there's any equity at all in the property, come on, Bill. If there's any equity at all in the property, and they want to get paid first, right? You know, no, you pay me first. Well, they actually share in the downside as well as the upside. So, welcome. How are you, buddy?
Hey, thank you.
Here, I am going to sit back down, so you can stand or sit, whatever makes it more comfortable.
Whatever you're gonna
do. I'm going to have a seat. Okay, so, Bill, welcome.
It's good to be here.
Okay, tell us.
It's a little wet out there, though.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, Bill's with BIA. There's a variety of different associations throughout, I assume, the entire country, but you're the Southern California, or is it Riverside chapter?
Riverside County and Imperial County.
Okay, tell us who your clients are. Who are you?
Our clients are home builders. About 15% of our membership are home builders of all sizes. Everything from a custom builder to a production builder like KB, Pulte, Lennar. You know all of them out there in the market. Those folks are all our members, and they're on our board of directors. We have quite a few division presidents who sit on our board of directors. And then the other 85% of our membership is everybody who does business with a builder. So when you go back to the National Association of Home Builders, which is our big parent organization, you've got the Kohlers, you've got the large manufacturers, the Deltas, Sub-Zero, GE, all the way down, locally we have people who are lawyers, architects, large roofers, asphalt layers, you name it. So anybody who wants to do business with a builder is going to make up that other 85% of our membership.
So what percentage of your board are builders right now?
About 60, just under 70%.
And how are they feeling today? Are they comfortable? Are they happy? What's going on with them?
Last year there was a lot of pent-up concern about where the market was going. I think many of our builders saw a really positive end to 2017, and they really accelerated in the first 5 months of 18 build a lot of units with the anticipation of a lot of sales. And I think you folks saw it as well. There was a wall. And what caused that wall was a spike in interest rates. And it's like, I heard one builder tell me, and it's a great analogy, it's like everybody got together in the Superdome who was thinking about buying a house, and they were told, don't buy houses now. And the traffic literally stopped, and people started falling out of deals. And it caused a lot of concern.
You know, to that point, and I wanted to touch base on it, and again, I think it was Mark or Rick or one of those guys, they brought up interest rates. One of the, I believe, the causes of that slowdown that we started to see in September, let's just say, certainly October, November, December, was we started to see interest rates go up. There was talk about, you know, what's the Fed chair going to do? You know, we're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4 increases in rates. We started talking about it, and we started to see it. And we said, oh my God, we saw rates at a little above 5%. That's pretty tough. When we see that type of a slowdown, and assuming it was caused at least in part by interest rate scares, I mean, what happens if interest rates go to 5, 5.5? Are we all going to have a panic attack? I mean, that's for those of us that have been around in a while, you know, 5% or 6% interest rate's not terrible. Now, I guess the good news is we've now seen interest rates. I mean, they've got a dozen lenders out in the room, but 4.5%, is that reasonable right now, ish? So we've certainly seen a pullback. So getting back to the builder clientele real quick. So who's building now? Who's got sticks going up and slabs being poured in basically Inland Empire?
Well, all the major public builders are building now. Last year ended up surprisingly being a good year when you look at permits pulled. We were up about 1,400 permits countywide in Riverside County. That was a great improvement. That's the first year since 1991 that, I'll just break it down for Western Riverside County, that we built over 5,100 units in Western Riverside County. We built 6,200 units last year, or pulled 6,200 permits. There is a little bit of a difference between obviously pulling a permit and actually going sticks in the air. So that was a good year. And you probably hear those numbers and go, those aren't great numbers. And that goes to your point earlier. Have we recovered from this recession? From my vantage point, our industry hasn't recovered. So when you start hearing about slowdowns and a lot of concern in the market, you scratch your head and you go, you know, why is this happening? We've never recovered. The housing market doesn't always follow the recessionary trends that we see. We've seen that throughout history. And you know, we talk to a lot of economists, as you folks do, and economists say we're in a good position for another year to 2 years. They believe that we're going to set an all-time record for the longest recovery ever, but a half a point, a full point in interest rates is a deal breaker for a lot of buyers.
It could change everything.
Everything.
And it's funny, I mentioned this briefly, and let's just for argument's sake say things changed in 2006, right? We saw a dramatic change in the real estate market or the economy in general, but let's just be local. Started to see a trough in 2010, 11, 12, depending upon where you were, and we've been recovering, right? We've been recovering for, let's just say 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, I mean, right? And
okay,
now,
I'll give you a number. In 2010, we built 2,100 units, or pulled 2,100 permits. Last year, we pulled 7,400.
Right. And do you know what the number is? I apologize if you don't, but what were we doing in 2003, 2004?
The big years were 2004 and 5, and countywide, we were right at 30,000. Just those 2 years, though.
Right. Yeah. So we're not building. Which then brings me, you were in Sacramento, what, last week?
Yes.
Tell us what you heard up in Sacramento. What's going on?
Well, you know, in my 19 years working in this industry and working for the association, I finally heard not only is there a housing crisis, something I think we all know, because you look at the pent-up demand out there and the lack of being able to provide enough housing for families, but you know, you heard it in unison throughout the Capitol. And I was up there for 3 days and met with the governor's housing staff members. We met with chairs of both housing committees, and it was in unison. We have a housing crisis. The legislature does not build housing. You guys build housing, and we need your help. And boy, was that refreshing. So how we get there, you know, it's going to be a lot of negotiating. There's a lot of interests at play, and we can get into that if we have some time. But in unison, we heard loud and clear, there's a housing crisis. We all need to do something about it, and it needs to happen now. And leading that charge is our governor, who said we're going to build 3.5 million homes in the next 7 years. Now, I'll give you some perspective.
In California?
In California, not nationwide.
That was a joke.
You know, we never built more than 300,000 in a year. So, and that was in 1963. Obviously, a much different entitlement, different processing time, obviously a much smaller population. The fact that he is putting so much of his political reputation on that number hasn't been reduced. They haven't couched it and said, well, we meant it on the election trail, but we're not sure. Not at all.
And those are single-family dwellings to be sold to homeowners?
That's all housing.
All housing. What percentage of that is apartment buildings? Because do we have our fair share of apartment buildings being built around here? Seems like a little more than our fair share.
It's going to be all housing types.
Right.
So, you know, the pessimistic side of you would say the $7.7 billion that's going to be in this year's budget to help make that happen, you can look at that and say, well, a lot of it's grants, a lot of it's bonds, a lot of it's for affordable housing. But we need all housing types, from the missing middle market that many of us try and serve to the lowest income. So you'll see apartments, you'll see single family. How we're going to get there and how the legislature is going to get there, you have some of the most liberal members of the California State Senate saying we have to reduce fees and we have to remove the barriers to build more housing. So they're seeing it in their own districts, in the Bay Area and in the urban areas like Los Angeles and the coastal markets. We've certainly seen it here. The sweet spot to build here in Riverside County is $400,000. You want to build to that FHA loan limit of 426, so you want to be around 400,000-ish, and that's a hard number to build to.
And that's because entitlements or?
Entitlement process and fees.
Okay, so you say barriers to entry. To me, I hear barriers to entry, and I'm not in your business. I just hear fees.
I think we're all in the same business.
Well, yeah, but I don't know anything about building a house.
Yeah.
And you know, I've heard, oh, these are $100,000 entitlements, and we got to get the water here, and before we grade the property, it's going to cost this, and it just doesn't pencil out. To me, that sounds like a barrier to entry from a builder's perspective. So how do we remove that? How does that even happen?
Well, you know,
What
during the recession, we actually had municipalities that waived fees, lowered fees. I think we're going to get back to that. There has to be CEQA reform. As much as, you know, the legislature's finally, it's been said for the last 2 or 3 years, every year I go up to Sacramento, I hear more and more, we got to do something about it, but it never happens. You actually have a governor who's pushing it. Jerry Brown wanted to do it, but didn't have the political will to do it, I guess.
Governor Newsom's pushing CEQA reform? Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah. So where we are with the legislative process right now, a week ago was the deadline to introduce legislation. And this Friday will be the deadline to take any of those bills that they just put a name on it and really a shell of a bill, if you will. And we call that spot legislation. So this Friday is the deadline to amend those spot bills and put language in them. A lot of business gets done that way in Sacramento. So I think after this week, we'll start having an idea what's out there. And then, of course, there's the committee process, the amending process of this legislation. The interesting thing is right now is that this isn't going to be solved this year, can't be solved this year. And, you know, time is ticking, right? We need to build 500,000 units a year. We've heard it from our governor. It's got to be done. So that means next year we're going to have to build a lot more units. And, you know, we might be staring at a recession, so there will be challenges. But I think the most refreshing thing is you're hearing legislators saying to us as an industry, what can we do to help you? What barriers do we need to break down? And we need to think out of the box.
Okay, hold on just a second. What time is it?
10:01.
10 o'clock? Okay, we heard the R word for the first time. We've been here for an hour, and Bill had to pull out the R word as in recession. Okay, so, by the way, Drake, how are we on time? 10:10 for Bill? So we got another 10 minutes? Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm curious as to see the speakers that come after you. Are they going to say, hey, you know, there's a recession coming, there's a recession, there's this, that. So what in the builder's world, or what in your world, would, other than maybe an interest rate issue, because we've kind of already addressed that, what triggers, what causes this recession that we're talking about for the last 3 years?
Honestly, what we saw the end of last year, from about May on, large numbers of cancellations where buyers literally had put their $5,000 down on their units. They had gone to the design centers. In a lot of cases, it put another $20,000 down and walked away from that. The industry has been.
But what caused that? Did they lose their job? Did someone die? Or did they just feel like this was a bad time?
I think it was all a feeling.
Feeling.
Interest rates was a factor. You can go a little deeper than that, and I think you folks felt it as well. Many units or many houses had been on the market longer than originally. I think you were probably advising.
Stop that. So, meaning what? They're not selling?
Days on the market.
I know, I understand, but what does that mean?
The existing housing stock's not selling, so the person.
Back up. So, back in January, February, I put it on the market. I'm a builder. How long does it take me to put that under contract? A month? 2? 10 days? 6 months?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, well, I'm going to put it in the residential. Yeah. Most of us are residential salespeople. So in the same context, we list a house. We have 4 offers in 3 days. We put it in escrow in a weekend or a week, and now we don't. Now what's the median price? I think Mark's number had that. Mark, do you remember what the median price, or not price, median days on market is now? What are we, 45-ish? 50. Okay, is that a bad number? Well, it's not a bad number, but if you're used to 10 days, right? So
I hear it's longer.
So that's my question.
I hear it's longer.
You folks. So if it was taking a little bit longer, what does that mean? 3 months, 4 months? What's a number that makes a builder uncomfortable? I've got properties ready to go. I've got contractors lined up, and I want to get them to work tomorrow.
It's not a number of days. It's how many units are on the market. So when they look out there, a new home competes against an existing resale home. Many of our buyers, or the industry's buyers, are contingent buyers. They have to sell their existing unit to move into a brand new unit. So if they're counting on selling their house in 30, 45 days, something like that, and you folks come out and tell them, hey, the market's changed a little bit where you live, and what we originally told you you could get for your home, I think it's a little bit less because houses are on the market longer, then that starts creating a problem. And while that's happening, interest rates are going up. That buyer that's qualifying on the edge all of a sudden doesn't qualify.
So that maybe answers the question I had earlier. So those people that were pulling out in May, they were contingent sellers or buyers. They needed to sell the house they had, and it wasn't happening as quickly?
I think it was a mixed bag. I think a lot of it was mood. They saw interest rates. Now, what the industry is seeing right now, and where this is positive, is there is some urgency, not a great urgency, but there is some urgency amongst the buyers that interest rates might go back up again because it retrenched back and people feel more comfortable with the number they're seeing today, let's call it 4.6%. And they see that they need to take advantage of that because interest rates could go up or they've been told they're going to go up. And builders have incentives. We didn't want to do that, but when you've got standing inventory and you've got trouble signs out there, people dropping out of sales and walking away from $20,000. And in my industry, it's a herd mentality. So if there's 3 developments in this general area and you don't want to, you're builder X and you don't want to lower your price, but your other 2 competitors just did, they'll walk away, the consumer will walk away from that $5,000 down and go buy a house over there. Or they'll go home and rethink it and think, maybe we shouldn't do this.
Right. So how many, raise your hand if you've cooperated or sold, taken one of your buyers to a new home track. Quite a few of you. Okay. Well, and for the most part, I don't want to put you on the spot, but it appears as though, given today's market, most builders are cooperating and paying commissions and general rules. You got to register and all that nonsense. Yeah. Interesting. Not to tie this back to Open Door, but let me give you guys something else to think about which I think this is new. I never heard of such a thing. And I'm certain most of Bill's builders are loving this sort of stuff and cooperating. One of the biggest challenges, of course, let's just take one of those people that maybe backed out of a transaction in May, right? And they backed out because maybe they weren't getting their property under contract as quickly as they like. You guys, are you aware what one of the solutions for these iBuyers are? Who raise your hand if you know where I'm going with this. Okay, the rest of you listen very closely. The buyer who wants to buy one of Bill's developments, it's KB Home in Moreno Valley, but it's contingent upon selling their house in Moreno Valley. That's nerve-wracking, right? When is it going to close? The builder says it's going to be done in August, but is it really going to be done in August? And we don't want to do a double move. Guess what Open Door will do? And it's not just Open Door, it's multiple of these companies. They'll buy it today, put you under contract, give you an escrow period that will go till whenever. So when the builder says, hey, we had a lot of rain and we're not going to be ready to close on August, it needs September, the buyer says, okay. Turns to the Open Door, are you still there? Yeah, I'm still here. We're ready to close when you're ready to close. Does that change things dramatically from a consumer's perspective? I think Mark or one of the speakers talked about convenience. One of the biggest challenges for us moving inventory is lack of convenience, especially when it comes to buying new homes. I mean, that's the thing that you guys have going against you all the time is I want to get in and I can't.
Your last speaker, what an interesting product, for our industry to see that as an option, because so many people, there is that concern of, do I go into contract and commit to buying another house, and how long will it take me to sell my existing house, and will it sell too quickly, and am I going to have to do a rent back, or am I going to be on the street, or what's going to happen? And you folks hear that all the time from your customers. Obviously, as an industry, we go through that as well. It's interesting you mentioned Moreno Valley, because that's kind of an interesting market right now. They're able to build, our industry is able to build a product around 400,000, and year over year, they doubled their amount of permits.
Hey, Drake, help me out.
So they doubled their amount of permits in just 1 year. So they're now the second highest permit puller in Western Riverside County is now the city of Moreno Valley. Very interesting.
I apologize, I got distracted there for a minute. Okay, so Moreno Valley is near and dear to me.
Yeah.
I've got a real estate officer, I've had one there for 30 years. There's a little bit of construction going on. And it seems like that's the price point. If it takes $400,000, why is there not more than a little bit? And I'm going to talk to, is Ito in the room, by the way? I don't know if Ito's here yet. We're going to talk to Ito about that, because Ito's got some undeveloped lots that are residential. And I ask him every year, when are you going to build them? And he just, later. So I know KB's building there, and Lennar's building in Moreno Valley and a few other spots, but it seems like, what's the price?
Why are we building so few units? I think that question goes for the whole county. It's the market. People aren't buying houses. They're just not confident still. When we talk about recovery from the Great Recession, and it was the Great Recession, our industry's never recovered. When you talk about at the height of the market building 30,000 units, and after all these years since 2006, when the drop started, the first layoffs in our industry were in 2006. 85% of our workforce is gone. By and large, it's been lost. People aren't confident to buy still.
So it's still a mood. Yeah. I don't know if Bruce is in the room yet, but he's got his mood-o-meter or whatever the heck he calls it. And it's a real thing. He tries to measure the mood of the consumer. And, in the same way the government measures consumer confidence and what have you. But it is an interesting thing. We'll see what Bruce and Dr. Husine and Thornburg have to say about all those other economic factors, because everything looks really, really good except maybe the mood. So anyway, thank you very much, Bill.
Yeah, thank you.
You got
I was just going to say,
we're good.
Even if things took off and even if we could build, our industry needs to develop another 200,000 workers in the trades to even come close to thinking about meeting the need. And we need to build, last year we built 113,000 units statewide. We needed to build a lot more. You need to build 200,000 just to keep up with the demand. So that's why we have a crisis. This crisis has been brewing for decades now. That's why we need to build 3.5 million homes. It's probably somewhere in that number, just to keep up with the existing demand. And that's the great challenge that's ahead for us all. I appreciate the opportunity to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
We're going to bring up Todd and Steve. They are sponsoring, and they were here last year. Matter of fact, they have shoes on this year. Wow, all right. Pull up a mic. We're going to need one more mic, Chief. Mic guy in the back. We need one more mic, please. Oh, well, maybe you guys could share. So this is the deal. I asked Todd and Steve, well, they sponsored. So, and by the way, if you sponsor, that doesn't automatically mean you get to come up here and talk. You got to have something interesting to say. But this is the deal. They've got a new thing going on with Back Porch Homes, but I don't want to talk about Back Porch Homes just yet. I want to talk about this chart that you sent me.
Hey, you made it tall and narrow.
Let me set the stage here for a second. So who's been to the Inland Empire Real Estate Investment Club that these guys are hosting? Okay, well, actually, I know you guys have a bunch of folks here. Okay, so I've known Todd and Steve for a long time, and for at least the last few years, it seems like, hey, we're doing a lot of stuff, and at least hosting and running the club and all the rest of that. And then I blinked my eyes, and I see Back Porch Homes. So you can, hey, we're doing this thing with Back Porch Homes, which they'll talk about here in a minute. I'm like, okay, wait a minute, let's step back here a little bit. So tell us what you're doing as it relates to real estate investing in the Inland Empire.
What we're currently doing or what we're moving to?
Well, both.
So we have been for the last, we've been in the hard money space and property flipping space for the last 5 years. That's been mine and Todd's primary role for almost a decade now, since actually I moved to your office in around 2008, because I could walk in the front door and buy a house for $70,000 that is worth $350,000 today. And if I kind of dig into this, we look at the market and, Homo economicus can't buy a home, right? Like there's no way a regular person can buy a home past about November of last year. Interest rates, pricing, none of that gets her. So we're out. We're unloading all of our inventory, and we're going to start building tiny homes.
Okay, so you've exited the single-family rental market, or
yes,
because of that chart?
Because the green line crosses the red line, and once the green line crosses the red line, and if anybody wants to see this because it's blurry and small, you can go to msaindex.com. It's just a link directly to these slides. You can actually see this slide and the explanation of how we got to this.
Okay, so your chart, and I don't have a pointer on this thing,
yep,
but your chart, somewhere on this side, there's a little arrow, and that green line passes the red line, and you said it's time to get out.
Yeah, because essentially, I know we only have so much time, but you have sort of three phases. You have the buy and hold, right, where the funds were buying during this last cycle. You have the buy and flip, which it doesn't pencil to hold anymore. And then you have what we're in now, which is the sell or pray market. You can either sell or pray that you can afford it when the market turns.
Okay, so when the green line and the red line go the other direction, you're happy, you're a player.
Yeah, as soon as that line crosses, basically the red line in this case is the median size home, which is important, the median price home, the payment based on the median interest rate, median size, and median price home all combined to what what all of us at the end of the day look at our household budget and say this is all we can afford. No fancy charts, Wall Street math, just straight what regular people can afford. And this is Moreno Valley, so this is way off the coast. And Moreno Valley crossed that line in November.
Right. Is Bruce in the room yet, Norris? Okay, he's still probably at Ivar. I'm glad because I'm interested. Who went to Bruce's 8-hour session? A couple of you? Well, Bruce is kind of sort of, I think, on the same page as you guys, at least from a standpoint of investments. Like, and I'll let him speak for himself, but I think he's kind of taken the position that he doesn't like the charts.
Yeah, I don't know what he's going to get into about their plan. I don't want to speak for them because I've talked to Aaron a lot, but we feel like they're kind of in the same place we are.
Okay, so you've more or less exited. So what about second choice? It kind of goes hand in hand. I haven't seen an email from you guys lately that says, hey, we're trying to raise some money, we're going to do some seconds, so we're not doing that anymore, just because it's just not working.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you doing? What's this all about? What
Tiny
is
homes. I'll explain the production model, and Todd will explain finance, since that's his side. So essentially, because the average person can't afford to buy, and even when the market turns, there's a housing shortage, and there's nothing affordable in the small home range. No builder is out there because it's $125,000 to create a lot, building a 1,000 square foot, 500 square foot home. So we're building, financing, manufacturing, relocating every single aspect of tiny homes, and this is our demo model that'll be built in the next 2 months. For $3,500 down and $439 a month, you can get a tiny home in your backyard for an aging parent, your kid, whoever is necessary. And it's basically infill, right? It's infill construction. It's just the infill goes in your backyard instead of the lot next door.
So we went from buying and selling real estate in the Inland Empire
to manufacturing, financing.
How does that make you feel out there?
And by the way, I'm a licensed realtor and have worked for Lance and been in the industry now for 15 years. And the last 5 and even really 10, I saw that model kind of dying, which is why we jumped to investments. And this is sort of, with the iBuyer. And I mean, there's 4,500 members in our club. So people bring us deals all day long, and they just don't pencil right now. We got to do something else. And this is way more fun.
Right. Which by the way, and I'm going to get it wrong, so if somebody knows, yell it out at me, but I think it was probably 6, 7, 8, 9 months ago, I saw an article somewhere that basically said the trend towards allowing, the granny flats in the backyard and the converted the garages, because that's been kind of going away for years and years and years. And for those of us that have had properties in the past, it was not uncommon to have a single family in the front and then a converted flat in the back for college kid to flop in, or grandma, or whatever it happened to be. And the zoning requirements have changed dramatically with that. They said, no, you can't do that. And they're blocking it. Well, I think it was 6, 7 months ago that the trend is, no, we don't want to do that anymore. We want to allow you to build a small dwelling in the back or convert whatever that happens to be and do it legally instead of bootlegging it. So, which I was intrigued when I saw this, because that in effect is kind of sort of what you're doing.
Yeah, no city wants to get sued by the governor for not building enough affordable housing. This is a very quick solution for most municipalities. You have was it just at 3.5 million short? It would take 1,000 companies like ours producing 1,000 units a year to meet that demand.
Well, what's your business model? Is your business model just someone just says, hey, I want to get my kid out of the house because he won't leave for school, or is I want to put this in my backyard and I want to rent it?
All of it. So I mean, Todd created a paper program, and he can explain the finance side of it, but like at $439 a month, and what's the average studio rent here? $900, right? You got a cash flow property in your own backyard. Well, Airbnb was the savior for a lot of people who owned a home and had too high of a mortgage payment during the last cycle. We put a tiny home in your backyard instead. That's the cash flow that helps pay for that mortgage you can't afford when the market turns. It's the same concept, just different model.
Interesting. Okay, Todd, what do we even bring you up here for? What do you got, man?
He's pretty.
What am I doing? I've been sitting down this whole time, apparently.
All right.
I'm glad I'm here.
We'll give you a couple minutes. Tell us what Stephen didn't tell us, and then they've got a whole bunch of information outside, and then get some more information from these guys.
Sure. So, I mean, the other issue becomes, like, if you build an ADU in your backyard, you need to be able to afford to build the ADU. You have to have equity in your home, or there have to be some kind of a loan program out there, which there really isn't. And a lot of times the cities are making a requirement where you have to be an owner-occupant. So if you own a rental property, you can't just build an ADU in the backyard, especially if you want to get financing for it. So you have to do it out of your own pocket. So the idea behind financing these is that, number one, we can make them affordable, which is a big deal for a lot of folks. A lot of people can afford $439 a month. And if you're an investor, you could even possibly subsidize that with Section 8 for an actual affordable tenant. But the idea to keep the price low was just to sort of make it affordable to everybody. Plus, it kind of creates a nice little note business for us on the side. So. Yeah.
Well, if they're habitable from a rental, and if they frankly will qualify for Section 8, it's interesting. How many can I put on my house? Can I get like 10 of them in the back?
Well, so everybody asked that question,
right?
Says. So we just went to the council last night for Riverside, and Riverside will be the first place we're pushing our agenda. Riverside had their second meeting about tiny homes, and the council kind of, but the mayor, is kind of behind the idea, and the staff sort of explained the barriers, but really the only municipal barrier in any way is there's a 3 to 15-day maximum stay, depending on municipality, in an RV, because this is DMV. Now, for those of you who don't understand what that means this is a auto title loan, which means we'd have no Dodd-Frank restrictions, which means we can write the paper however we want. And I don't have to worry about going in to look at your tax returns and all of a sudden go, oh, right, you wrote too much off or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, but I'm not going to get a Section 8 tenant in that, am I? That's not going to work.
You can't get a Section 8 tenant?
Well, I'm asking.
I mean, as long as you're willing to put a Section 8 tenant in your backyard, because that's essentially where it's going, right? This is a companion unit. Everybody laughs, right? This is a companion unit to your home.
Well, I'm only using that as an example because they're a little more regulated than, a non-government subsidized housing program.
Well,
so they're going to come out, they're going to approve that, they're going to come out and do their inspection.
Well,
and say,
so you own a property management firm. What are some things you noticed about this unit that they wouldn't approve?
I don't know. It's tiny.
It's tiny? Do they have a minimum square footage requirement?
I don't know. Well, maybe there'll be a new line on the housing list that says this is what this would rent for.
If you I know we're going to run short on time.
Yeah, we are running short. So anyway, very interesting. Thanks for being honest and straightforward with this as far as the red line, green line. I did not know that you guys were doing that until, frankly, we talked whatever that was a month or so ago. So good luck on the new venture. Yeah. And
we didn't mention, but we are sponsoring because we're raising money, but we can't really talk about anything from stage. So if you are looking to make a investment in equity, we're looking for more capital.
They're in their Series A fundraising. All right, guys.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, is Ito? God, I hope Ito's here. Is Ito here? Ito's here. Come on up, Ito. How are you, buddy? Hey, Drake, I don't have an agenda. Are we on time? 3 minutes over. How are you, buddy? Grab a mic and let's maybe grab a stool. So, how are you?
I'm well, thanks.
I'm
great
so
being
glad
here.
that
It
you're
almost
in
looks
town.
like a tradition now. How long have we been doing this? Like four years in a row?
It's been a little while.
Yeah.
It's been a little. You did give me a panic attack last year, though.
I did?
Yeah.
What happened?
You were going on stage in 10 minutes and you weren't here, and then you called me and said you were in Sacramento or San Francisco, and I'm like, oh, geez. So
yeah, you can't really rely on flights anymore. You think you're coming in an hour early and it's 2 hours late.
So, how have you been?
Been great. Been very busy, active in a lot of different areas, and just watching the market and see how things are going so far. At least we're not really active in the residential market in California. Back in Florida and other places, it's going very strong. But out here, we're mostly in the industrial space, hospital space, and so forth, and that's still going very strong.
Okay, so let's start with that. So, how is the market? So you're building and you're doing things in other areas, it sounds like. So Florida, what's that what you said, Florida?
Florida.
Okay. So what are we not doing in the Inland Empire that you'd like to be doing?
Well, we all know that housing is a big issue, and that's a complicated issue that obviously has to work itself out. The unaffordability issues and the lack of housing is a big impediment. Because even if you're bringing jobs, bringing industry, they look at the housing market, they look at affordability, they look at what does it cost to do business here. And for a variety of factors, definitely has an impact. On the other hand, it's a very big, strong market. So far, people have been willing to pay the price and deal with the issues and still be here. We have literally 1.8 billion square feet of industrial space, all occupied.
Say that again, $1.8 billion?
Not dollars, 1.8 billion square feet.
Oh, square feet, I'm sorry.
Industrial space in the Southern California basin,
right.
Literally all occupied, almost no vacancy. So what is that? And we're building about 20 million square feet a year of new product.
Yeah.
Which gets absorbed.
But that's on the industrial side. Okay, so let's leave the residential aside for a second. Let's talk about the logistics center, because that's how most people know Ito, through the World Logistics Center and the Skechers plant, and he's running for mayor in Moreno Valley. And
no, I'm running away from politics, yeah.
No, but anyway, let's not even go there. Forget that nonsense. Okay, so the industrial stuff, the new stuff that was just recently built off the 60,
right.
That's not part of your project.
No.
But obviously that's the same concept of what you want to do. And then all of that other newer stuff that's basically been built throughout the 215 corridor. So that's 100% occupied?
Not all of it, because people are always building in advance of the market a little bit, but essentially everything gets absorbed. And when you see buildings that are a little bit ahead of the market, it's just because they understand the requirements in the market and they're pacing themselves a little bit ahead of demand. But eventually, it all gets absorbed. So far, every year, year after year, vacancy has been dropping and demand and single. And there are a lot of drivers for it. Even despite all the trade wars you hear, the number of TEUs and containers that came through the port of LA actually went up, not down. So people still want to buy things. And part of the thing that's sort of sometimes not clearly understood, but when you look about a lot of the things that comes in, that we see at least, are consumer goods, right? Stuff you buy at Costco, at Walmart. And the reality is, most consumers, unless it's a commodity, don't quite understand the price. So people think, well, gee, if there'll be tariffs and something will cost 20% more, people will buy less. It's true to some extent, but what really happens, I'll give you a personal experience. I was at Costco a couple months ago, and there was this large TV, like an 82-inch TV, $3,500. And we need it now for the office. So I buy it, we buy it. I'm there that weekend. That was like on a Tuesday. We needed it for the office. So I'm there on the weekend. The same television now is $29.99.
It started at
it's like
$35.
$500 less. It was
$3 days later.
Like earlier in the week, like on a Tuesday, it was $3,500. By the weekend, it was $29.99, $500 off. So I look at it and I say, I thought it was a reasonable, good price. I was willing to pay $3,500 for it. Now it's $29.99. Now, I would have bought it either way. Now, good thing for Costco, they gave us a refund, match the price. But the point was...
Could you see Ito going in there with his receipt?
Yeah, it's $500. I would have done it. It didn't happen to be me, but I would have done it. The point is that if things are priced at a reasonable level that most people sort of still see value in, like I wouldn't know if that TV should have been $29.99 or it should have been $3,500 or $3,200 or $3,900. I would no idea, and I thought it was a reasonable price, we still buy it. And that's kind of what happens to a lot of consumer goods. If your shoes should have been $69.99 and now they're $75 or $74.99, you just don't know. Now, if it's a commodity, we all know the price of gas, we all know the price of some things, and if they go up by 10 cents or 20 cents, we all scream and say, what's going on? But in a lot of consumer goods, they still keep coming in because people still would like to buy those things.
I can't even believe I'm going to ask you this, but so what's driving that? Let's talk about the TV thing for a second, because I think there's some parallels to the real estate industry and all the rest of that. I agree with you. I also went and bought a TV. I wasn't looking at the $3,500 TVs. I was looking at what I thought was going to be like a $1,200 or $1,300 TV, and I walked out of Best Buy with a $400 TV, 55-inch something or other. I would have paid $1,200. I walked in there fully expecting to pay the same exact story, and I just did this within the last 2 weeks. So that tells me that maybe that's not being driven by the consumer as much as the competitive nature of the vendors. So whether I'm a Samsung, in order for me to be competitive, I can't be the same price as the TLCs, or if I'm TLCs, maybe a better example, the kind of that cheap TV, which looks pretty damn good to me, but they're so inexpensive, which kind of makes me wonder how much of that's going on in our industry. We just tend to be cutting our commissions and cutting our value on a daily basis. So I guess my question is, what's driving that? What's driving? Is it competition between the manufacturers, or is the consumer demanding a lower priced television?
It's sort of a lot of the above, plus the fact that you're dealing with things that essentially are technology. And over time, technology, the price of technologies keeps on going down. So if you remember, my first cell phone, I forget what it was like $2,500. In those days, you could buy a house for that almost.
Actually, I think those houses that the teeny homes are.
Yeah, you could buy a house for that. So if you remember those first cell phones, right, the Motorola cell phones, they were super expensive relative to what it were. And now you can go to Walgreens and they give you a phone for $10 or $12, take it. And these are the flip phones. These should be the expensive phones at the time, right? So what happens with technology, it becomes commoditized. How many people know what the price of 1 gigabyte was in 1980? right?
A gigabyte?
Yeah. Anybody guess? Yeah, $1 million. You couldn't even get. We have floppy.
I wouldn't let Ido bring his PowerPoint this time, but he's got a really cool PowerPoint that $1 million.
$1 million. So what is it today?
$10, $20.
A cent. Okay.
A cent.
So that's why you see a lot of devices, as they say, getting smart. What it basically means, they have a chip in it. A chip that used to cost $1 million, now costing a cent. They literally print it. You know, once you get down to the technology where you can print chips with 1 million transistors on them, it's, right? The price goes down, and all of a sudden you have a lot of items, a lot of things, technologies that used to be expensive, and the price keeps on dropping. And you see also a shift for a lot of those guys. They want to shift to some subscription models as compared to just selling you the commodities. So Apple, everybody goes, their cell phone, they can fetch a lot of money for them so far, but they don't understand they have to switch on some kind of a, you know, subscription-based something, you know, whether it's, you know, apps or whether it's,
Yeah,
you
we're all doing that. Everyone's, whether you realize, well, I think most of us are doing it. I get pinged all the time that I just got charged $5, $9, $12 for something I didn't even know that I'd been paying for the last 12 months because I wanted to watch some UFC fight. And now who's now paying for ESPN Plus, right? Am I the only one who's paying for ESPN Plus? Now I'm paying. Well, in the last UFC fight a few months ago, you wanted to watch it, you had to go to UFC Plus. It was free for 30 days. After that, it's $5. So now I've been paying $5. Okay, let's get back to logistics. So when are you going to start building in your project? What's holding you up?
We have another building coming out now. We're still sort of in the, they call it, if you look at it as a process, we're sort of in the last quarter of the CEQA process. I said many times that the closest I ever get to internal life is going through the CEQA process. It's a good thing we were young when we started, but because it takes a long time. The average time frame now in California for any project of any size or consequence is about 10 years to 12 years.
Yeah, I'm not joking when I say this. Are you going to be alive to see this project completed?
Unless you know something I don't know, but I'm still healthy. I just had my checkup, and it looks like we'll be around for quite a while. So, but yes, it's a joke, but on average it takes about 10 years now. And there's a whole cottage industry of people that are basically hold-up artists. And anybody can sue, it doesn't cost any money. And you can hold up project for, you know, basically getting out of the way. If you're willing to pay, they get out of the way sooner. If you're not willing to pay, you drag along. I'm not exactly willing to pay ransom, so I'll just chug along and you get through the courts and you have wins and sometimes you have to adjust things, but eventually you get there. But the timing is just right. We have a massive project that requires a massive amount of engineering and infrastructure, and that engineering takes several years to do. So we've been going along, doing all the work, sort of hoping that by the time we do that and finish that, it'll be just about the time that we go through the
And how many square feet do you have?
It's on the ground, the footprint is 41 million square feet. But one thing that's changing because of markets and technologies, we're starting to get higher clear height. So what used to be a standard of 32 high clear height building became 36 and became 40, 45. We're seeing buildings at 60 and 70. The new Amazon facilities, I think 70-foot clear. So but if you have a 70-foot clear building compared to a 32 clear, you basically have twice the building on the same footprint. So we have up to 80-foot clear in the World Logistics Center. So essentially that 41 million square feet will probably have the capacity of about 120 million square feet.
Okay, so how aggravated are you that Aldi went in next door to you, the Wolverine place went in Banning or Beaumont on the other side of the Badlands, and then the new ones that are being built? How come that's not yours? How come, is that, what happened?
Well, there's several things. First of all, we're large, so we're more of a focus or a target for people than, you know, when you're going out, the building here, building there, sort of as a big target, you get more attention to it. But at the same time, it's also our own pace. I'd like to be an infill site. You know, I don't want to really be in the commodity space where everybody's building millions of square feet necessarily at the same time, and they all argue about another half a cent or a cent a square foot. I'd rather build technology-driven buildings that have the quality in them and the sophistication that others necessarily are not prepared to build for one reason or another, and sort of come into the market when it's less of a commodity space. It's also like what happened with office building in downtowns, right? Like Manhattan or LA. When you're out of a space, you start going up, and rents are going up. Same thing with retail. It used to be where you can go to another city or buy 100 acres and build a regional mall. Well, there's no more of that. So the malls we have are the malls we have, and that's why you see in the good malls, the price keeps on rising. In secondary locations, you see troubles in retail. So it's the same thing in this space. It's a very crucial piece of infrastructure. The whole logistics industry becoming a big factor of GDP. It's probably, sort of the new trophy class of real estate. It used to be high-rise office buildings were the most valued real estate. Now logistics centers are probably...
Yeah. When you and I first started talking, I was way, way behind the curve, and I'm not sure I really understood it. I was even kind of new to Amazon. Now, of course, I'm addicted, and just from our perspective, I mean, we're, for the most part, retail consumers, but from my perspective, what that means is I have a real estate office with 6,000 square feet. Well, guess what my real estate offices are doing? We just relocated my Redlands office down to a quarter of that size. And my intention is not to reduce my agent count. I want to increase my agent count, but I don't need 6,000 square feet to do that operation anymore, technology and all the rest of that sort of stuff. So whether it's a mall or Sears is pulling out, but that's not the case for your business. So you're way ahead of us on that. So you're building tilt-ups and warehouse stuff, and the office space and the mall space and the retail space is shrinking, and frankly, it's going to you, right?
Well, in a large extent, there's been a lot of disruptors in the industry. I didn't almost have any industry. We used to go to video stores, and then there's Netflix, right? We used to go to record stores, and now there's iTunes. And every town in America had record stores. And those are big disruptors. But at the same time, if you understand where things are going and what it will drive, there's lots of opportunities, right? So e-commerce, we all had experience. Who bought anything at Amazon? Raise your hand. I just want to see how many people participate in this e-commerce. Almost everybody has raised their hand, which means it's now ubiquitous, right? Everybody has been doing it. And what's happening, all of that activity is just about maybe 10% of retail today. It's just not even a big factor. And it's growing, and that's why you see the traditional models, the video stores, the Sears, the old mall structures are sort of going by the wayside. It's sort of the old generation technology. And what's happening when you're buying stuff through Amazon and not through a brick and mortar retail store? It's coming out of a logistics center. It's coming out of a fulfillment center.
You've basically taken Sears square footage, more or less, or the logistic industry has taken the square footage. I know it doesn't correlate, but in effect, that's where it's at.
If I can just describe it, it'd be very simple what happened and what the technology shift is. So what we had with retail is, I don't want to call it primitive, but a very basic distribution model. What do? Like the supermarket. We bring the warehouse to the neighborhood, closer to our customers. We make the customer go in the warehouse and do the picking himself, put him in the cart, push it to the cashier, pay for it, process the payment, then put it in his own car and be his own delivery person. That's what the old model of retail. Now it's reverse, right? The retail is coming to you. You call Amazon or you order something in Amazon, somebody in that warehouse is doing the picking, is going through the aisles, picking your stuff, getting the processing done, the payment, and then having somebody deliver it to you. So it's the same thing that's happening, it just reverse. The retail is coming to you where we used to have to go to the warehouse, to the supermarket, do our own picking.
But it's with everything now. Who's getting food delivered? I mean, my wife called California Pizza Kitchen, and I don't even know what a Grubhub or whatever the hell it is. And 10 o'clock at night, I've got a Sicilian pizza sitting in my house. I didn't have to go anywhere.
And it's global. If you ever notice, like I just happened to be at the plant in Italy, in Modena, but if you're buying Trader Joe pizzas, frozen pizzas, they're actually coming from a factory in Italy. Stuff is moving almost at the speed of sound around the world, where you think in the old days you look for a baker or a bakery or a pizza plant around where you are in California, maybe adjacent states, or maybe all the way to Indiana or someplace. Now, because of the robust logistics infrastructure around the world, stuff is coming from all over the world, literally overnight, or within a few hours. So they can get the pizzas out in Modena, Italy, and literally be at your store within 18 hours. So actually faster than driving a truck to adjacent state or a couple of states over. But I do want to sort of tie it into what it means to real estate and residential real estate.
Yeah, I want to wrap up on the residential side, but before we do that, I'm going to show my cards here a little bit. I saw Mr. Husing or Dr. Husing somewhere. We got him, is he getting queued up? He's in the back? Oh, he's behind me. Do we have your PowerPoint? Hey, John. We have your PowerPoint. Who's helping him with that PowerPoint? Drew, Drake, somebody get that set up while Ido and I are wrapping up here in the next 5-10 minutes. Yeah, we're still figuring this event stuff out here. So, okay, so residential. Were you here earlier when Bill Blankenship with BIA was here? Did you miss him?
Yes, I did.
Okay, we talk residential a lot. We're building, I don't know what he said, a few thousand units here and there, but still seem to kind of be stuck in the mud a little bit. What's it going to take? Because I know you have single-family residential lots that are sitting there. What's the trigger? What's the trigger for you personally before you're going to start building houses?
So there's a couple of factors. One is the market and pricing, and we have a lot of entitlement costs associated with residential, and people can argue how much are they and how much they impact, and there's a lot of factors impacting it. But the reality is to produce a finished lot in some markets today costs you $110, $120, $130, depending, $1,000, how much offsites and what else you have. That's before you start putting a house.
Okay, so $110,000 before you, just entitlements, water, sewer, city fees, whatever.
Everything else, yeah.
And one of the things that Bill said, I don't know if Bill, if you're still in the room or not, but Bill was talking about, you know, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you see that changing? Do you see any city government sitting back and saying, "Hey, we want to encourage some new home ownership or some new home building. We're gonna reduce those fees by 30% or 2%"?
The honest answer is, I'm sort of an optimist. To do anything we do, you got to be an optimist. But it really says, probably not. There'll be adjustments around the edges, but there's all of structural things that have to change in order for that to happen. And California is an anomaly. See what's happening, you have to start from the top. Almost 40%, 50% of all tax in California is paid by 900 companies. We have this anomaly, which is gigantic companies. That's like Apple, $1 trillion. That's like having 1,000 $1 billion companies in the state paying taxes. Then you have Google at $800 billion. That's another 800 $1 billion companies in the state. Then you have all the other tech companies, and we end up with about 5,000 or 6,000 $1 billion company equivalents paying taxes in California. No other state's anything near that. You have a few billion-dollar companies in your state, you think you're doing great. So when you have that type of anomaly, where such a concentrated area of the economy is producing the biggest impact, almost everything else falls by the wayside. And so, unless there's a switch in mindset that we say California is ready for everybody and everybody should afford it, you know, the guy in San Francisco in Silicon Valley where the home goes up from, you know, 100,000, 200,000, they get a little pay raise and everybody goes on and the prices keep on going up and they get absorbed and it's unaffordable, but it keeps on being bought. And it's not bought by people who are struggling. These are $1 million houses plus. So it's, you know, when we talk about struggling and affordability issues, we're talking about affordability for millionaires, right? Not just the average person trying to buy a house. But I think there's good news in all of it. And I think what the good news will be is that we're shifting our economy, even in the Inland Empire, which will impact housing, and it ties to logistics, and I'll explain it. We're moving from basically manual skill type labor to technology-driven real estate, which requires, you know, technology-driven jobs. So they require a step up in education, and you know, it's not easy, but it's sort of moving slowly, but to the recognition that that's happening. Those are higher paying jobs. Those are more skilled jobs. Those folks will earn more, and by earning more, they'll have more capacity to buy the homes at the value that we can actually produce in California.
So we're running short on time here. So I think I've asked you this question a dozen times. I don't think you've ever answered it, so I'm going to try one more time. What's the price point? I mean, you've got to have a number back there that says if I can sell a product in Moreno Valley, single-family resident, at this price, I'm in. Again, I believe Bill said, what was the number you said, around 400 grand? About 400 grand. Okay, and 400 grand in Moreno Valley those sales are there, but that's, I don't know. If you don't have to tell me, is there a price, do you have a price that says, if I see that price, I'm going to go clean up those lots and start pulling permits, or maybe you got permits pulled already, I don't know. But is there a price, first of all?
Well, there's always a price, right? The reality is twofold. We own most of our real estate, and we're sort of different than the typical builder at this scale, and that is that we sort of run debt-free. So there's no impulse, there's no debt, there's no sort of Wall Street or investors and pension funds or anybody else that usually gets involved in this.
So it's free and clear, it's your decision.
So we basically, when we think the market is ripe and there's momentum, and there's sort of a momentum for price escalation, and there is enough demand to build large scale. So we don't build a tract of 100 homes or 120 homes or 80 homes. We got, in Moreno Valley, for example, you mentioned Coldwell is 3,000 units. Right. So we put all the infrastructure in, all the backbone infrastructure is in, all the offsites are in, it sort of mass graded. So it's market ready in the sense that when we see the market coming in, we could be in the market fairly quickly.
So let's wrap up with this. Let's fast forward 10 years from now. And if you're not familiar with Ito's land, it's basically kind of adjacent to Moreno Valley Ranch. Nason kind of splits it.
By the hospital there.
By the hospital. Are we going to see houses on that land 10 years from now?
Yeah, for sure. A lot sooner. So also what drives housing.
For sure. Houses for sure.
Yeah. And
okay.
Now the kind of product will be there probably won't be the product that we conceive might be there 10 years ago. But several things will impact housing in Moreno Valley, and I think positively. Healthcare is becoming bigger and bigger. If you've been around the hospital, you see major investment are going in. There's a 200,000 office medical building being built. That's going to be populated by highly paid people. At some point, if the right kind of housing is available for them, they'll want to live closer to their jobs. Kaiser has a plan to expand their campus to 1 million square feet. So that's a lot of positive stuff. World Logistics Center will create about 33,000 jobs, 13,000 construction jobs, 20,000 permanent jobs. We all know that jobs actually drive housing.
So what we need is an older population, which needs health care, which means higher paying jobs, which then we can build houses for the healthcare providers to take care of the old people.
Not just those, but logistics folks that are essentially ready for the next generation operations, which are essentially advanced manufacturing as well as technology-driven logistics operations. Those are higher paying jobs. They're going to be able to afford the homes that right now are unaffordable.
Got it. Okay, Ito, we got to wrap. Last time we did this, we did 2 hours. So thank you so much, Ito. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to probably need, why don't you, I don't want you to fall down the stairs over there.